Good afternoon. My name is Helene Reingold, and I call my program Conversation with Art. It's very nice to be with you today. And today we're going to talk about selfies, self-portraits through art history. Artists do lots of self-portraits. One, because the subject is always available, and perhaps two, because the subject is inexpensive. Let's take a look at the first one. Perhaps you recognize the artist without looking at his signature. He's known for doing 321 covers of the Saturday Evening Post. He did this at the age of 66 in 1960, and it was, in fact, on the cover of the magazine then. It's Norman Rockwell, and he signed his name right here. Artists tell us lots about themselves in their self-portraits. Let's see if we can figure out something about Norman. He's always drinking something. He's always drinking something, and that's Coca-Cola. Loved it. He loved it. He bought this helmet in Germany, the significance of which only he knows, but he liked it enough to put it in his self-portrait. He's always smoking a pipe. 1, 2, 3. And in fact, he would empty his still warm ashes into this bucket, and occasionally the bucket would, in fact, catch on fire. He was a formally trained artist, very thoughtful, always did studies before he actually painted. And he's interested in self-portraiture in this one because we have 1, 2, 3, 4 self-portraits of artists throughout art history. We have a Van Gogh, we have a Picasso, we have a Rembrandt, and we have this gentleman, which we're going to talk about in a moment. Notice that Rockwell has something right here. Just a moment. He has something right here, leaning against the canvas. This diagonal line, it's a mahl stick, M-A-H-L. Artists have used this for hundreds of years. They rest it against the canvas, and then they rest their hand against the stick so that the hand does not touch the canvas and perhaps smear some of the paint. We're going to see this mahl stick again and again. Norman Rockwell. 3 times. As a painter, as an observer, and as a public figure. One of my favorite self-portraits, by the way. This was the 4th self-portrait that Rockwell had on his canvas. A gentleman who lived 500 years before Rockwell did and studied in Venice, and he puts a landscape of Venice through the window. Notice that he is not full body. He's cut off at the waist. At this point, only the nobility were allowed to be painted in full body. Everybody else did half or bust portrait. Bust portraits are just from the shoulders to the head. He's 27 years old here when he does this. And he's quite successful. And he wants us to know he's successful because look at the way he's dressed. He's dressed beautifully, very wealthy. And he's looking right at us. He wants us to look right at him. Some people feel that he paints himself in an almost Christ-like appearance. I leave that up to you to decide. Does have beautiful hair though, doesn't he? This is oil on wood. Before artists used canvas, they painted on wood. This artist did many, many engravings. He was quite the businessman. He sold engravings and printings because they were easier to do and they could be reproduced hundreds and hundreds of times. Dürer was a businessman as well as an artist. Albrecht Dürer. Do you see something you should recognize that Rockwell had in his hand? Yes, indeed. Here's my mouse stick. Thank you. Here's my mouse stick. And this is a young lady who is an artist. She has her palette and she has her brush. She's looking right at us. Half-body portrait. This young lady's name is Sofonisba Angesula. She became one of the most famous and well-known female portrait artists in Europe. Self-taught and trained by her father. Women did not go to art school. They were not allowed. She's one of 5 girls, and her father was quite a progressive gentleman. Each one of them were educated, and 4 of the 5 became artists. She was so well known that Michelangelo actually critiqued her work, and this painting was given to him by Sofonisba's father as a thank you for the critique. She becomes the court painter in Madrid. Being a court painter is very prestigious and a job that artists really sought, because you lived in the palace, you ate with the king, you only had to please one patron, and you lived very well. She dies at the age of 92, and she's painted by Anthony van Dyck. Sofonisba Angesula. Perhaps some of you recognize this style. Not nearly as realistic, a bit more impressionistic. Here's my painter holding the brush, and he's holding a book, not looking at us. This is a self-portrait by Domenikos Theotokopoulos. We know him as El Greco. And he paints himself as Saint Luke, Luke being the patron saint of artists and craftsmen. Born in Crete, studies in Rome, and moves to Spain. He wanted to become the court painter, never happened. Did many portraits of the clergy in Toledo. He was quite a fervent Catholic. St. Luke, and I suspect this is a Bible. Oil on canvas. There's a self-portrait of the artist who did this. Do you see him? We are in his studio. We've walked in. We've interrupted him, actually. And he's standing in front of a huge canvas. I'm sorry. He's standing in front of a huge canvas right here. We're going to get a better look at him in a moment. This artist becomes the court painter for Philip IV of Spain. Here's Philip's daughter, the Principessa Maria Theresa, her pet dog, her pet dwarves. Dwarves were very prominent in the courts of Europe at this time. They entertained, and they also took care of the animals. These are her ladies in waiting. This painting is called Las Maninas, the handmaids, or the family, because behind the Principessa, we have her parents. The artist is Diego Velázquez. Here's Philip IV, and here's his wife. Notice the paintbrush. He's looking right at us. Very successful painter, as I said, court painter to the king. Notice the mustache. If you're familiar with Salvador Dali, you need to know that Dali thought Velázquez was the greatest painter ever, and so he decided to grow a mustache that looked just like his heroes. Diego Velázquez. He became a Knight of Malta. Is he proud of this? What color did he use? Red. He wants us to see that. He definitely wants us to see that. But the knighthood was conferred on him 4 years after he paints this. It's right here. Can artists go back and change and add and subtract? Of course they can. Of course they can. And he has a palette right here. And on that palette is every color that he used in Las Meninas. Diego Velázquez. Looking again right at us, engaging us. Different style, different part of Europe. Anyone have an idea where this painting might have been done? Here's my clue. What does he have in his hand? And we have something on the ground that's broken. Yep, it's a Dutch clay pipe. So we're in Holland. And the artist has painted himself into the scene. He wants us to notice him because he, in fact, has put a red kerchief on, and he's in the center. Good way to catch the eye. Jan Steen, S-T-E-E-N. Doesn't do the nobility, doesn't do the clergy, doesn't do the wealthy. Everyday Dutch people. He never made an awful lot of money, so he also is a tavern keeper. And he paints himself in that scene. This is his tavern. And this is his wife. He looks quite happy. She, well, let's see. Her bodice is open. Her collar is askew. One shoe is off. Shoes thrown from feet are symbols of sexuality. She has her other foot resting on a coal foot warmer, and her legs are open. I'm going to leave the rest to your imagination. Jan Steen paints at the same time as Vermeer. Notice the chair. Lion heads, nail heads, gold nail heads, and leather back. Fashioned after Spanish furniture. So that sets our scene. This is the middle 1600s, and he, of course, knew the art of Rembrandt, and he, of course, knew the art of Vermeer. Jan Steen. Broken pipe. Drunkenness. Recognize something here? What is this woman holding? Here's my mouse stick again. Clearly identifies her as an artist. Palette. brush in front of an easel. We are indeed in her studio. And this young lady's name is Adelaide Labille-Guiard, Guiard, Adelaide Labille-Guiard. She was self-taught. Again, women could not go to art school, and also trained by her father. And way in the back here, there's a bust, and that's her father's face. We're in her atelier, we're in her studio. These two young ladies are students of hers. Notice the way she's dressed. She was a master of textiles. I love this hat. Would she have been dressed this way to paint? No, of course not. But she'd like to look as good as she can for her self-portrait. Adelaide Labille-Guiard. She painted Louis XIV's daughters and Louis XVI's daughters. Female artists painted women, usually. She becomes a member of the Royal Academy in France, a great honor. Only 4 women were ever elected to that before women were allowed to go to art school. She's one of them. Adelaide Labille-Guiard, very realistic, very photographic. This is before photography, so we need to know exactly what the person looks like. Notice the lights on her. Yeah, the textile is gorgeous. Just gorgeous. Adelaide Labille-Guiard in her studio. Also, look at her body language. Is she comfortable with who she is? Yes. Half-body portrait. Artist directly engaged with us. This self-portrait was done outside using a mirror, which is in fact how artists would do that, would do self-portraiture before the invention of photography. But we now have photography for about 50 years. This artist still chose to do it from a mirror. If you were anyone wealthy or well-known in Europe, Western Europe, you wanted John Singer Sargent to paint you. And this is in fact who this is. Sargent was an expatriate. He was born in Europe. He spent most of his artistic life there. He did come to this country. He did do Isabella Stewart Gardner. He did John D. Rockefeller. And he did President Woodrow Wilson. He famously said in about 1915, I'm not going to paint portraits anymore because every time I paint a portrait, I lose a friend. Very, very astute comment, because he was rather honest in his portrayal of his subjects. This is a self-portrait that was commissioned by friends of his because he had just won a prestigious award. He was a member of the the French Legion of Honor. Very few non-French people have been elected to that. The Legion of Honor was started by Napoleon in 1802, and you had to be pretty well recognized in your field, certainly as a non-Frenchman, to be elected, and he was. So his friends commissioned him to paint himself, and this painting hangs in the Uffizi Gallery in Italy. How does he feel about himself? A successful artist showing himself as a success. completely self-taught. Notice the features. African American artist. No attempt to disguise the fact that he is in fact African American. Notice the lips, notice the skin, and he's very proud of who he is. He always signs his artwork in white. This is Horace Pippin in front of a canvas, holding a brush. He painted at night, and he was the custodian during the day. Notice the arm, the forearm. Pippin was in the First World War and shot in this shoulder. And he came home with a rather withered, weak arm, but he still wanted to paint. So his wife suggested that he take this left hand and put it underneath his right elbow and paint that way. Man worked during the day, not a lot of time, paints at night, 2 or 3 paintings a year, that's it. He meets Albert Barnes, Barnes Foundation, Philadelphia, in 1940, and attends a few art classes, because you know the Barnes Foundation started out as an art school. Barnes is enchanted with his work, and in 1946 gives him a one-man show. Sells out completely. 1947, unfortunately, Horace Pippin dies. Never really appreciating his fame and certainly not rewarded financially. We're going to end with this photograph, self-portrait. This is a woman from Iran. Her name is Shireen Nishat, born in 1957. Shireen Nishat, she's still alive. She actually had a huge show at the Broad Museum in LA about a year or 2 ago. She's a photographer. She's political. She's thrown out of Iran in 1974, and she comes back in 1994. She does a series of artwork called Women of Allah. She wants us to look right at her. She knows who she is. She's comfortable with who she is. And she paints poetry on her face in henna. That's that brown liquid that women in that part of the world use to decorate their hands. It's a beautiful poem. I want to read part of it to you. Remember, she's in exile. I am coming, I am coming. I will come again with my long hair dripping, the secret of dirt, with my eyes inflicting the density of darkness, with brambles I've picked from the far side of the wall. I am coming, I will come again. And the doorway once more will be filled with love. I will greet the lover standing in the doorway, and the little girl there still standing in love. Shireen Nishat. Norman Rockwell. Albert Dürer. Sophonisba anguissola, El Greco, Diego Velázquez, Jan Steen, Adelaide Labille-Guiard, John Singer Sargent, Horace Pippin, Shireen Nishat. I hope you've enjoyed these selfies as much as I've enjoyed sharing them with you. And I'll see you again. Thank you.